Welcome to week 6 of the psychology of adult development. And in this class, we're going to go over personality and clinical assessments. I usually send you guys these slides, but I wanted to also provide audio to go along with the slides to explain some of the things that are a little bit more complicated to understand. There are 3 assumptions that go along with the creation of traits. The first one is that traits are comparison-based. So there are no absolute standards for these concepts such as friendliness, outgoing, kind, things like that. It's just that someone who is kind compared to someone who's unkind, they're going to act different. And you can see that in comparing one to the other. The next assumption with traits is that they are distinctive, which means that traits must be distinctive enough from each other to avoid confusion. So for example, you would not confuse someone who is friendly with someone who is aggressive because they are distinctive enough to show the difference. So someone who is friendly is going to probably smile all the time, be more open to talk to new people, versus someone who is more aggressive. They might be more argumentative. They might keep their distance from others on a more normal basis compared to someone who's generally friendly. And the third trait assumption is that it's pretty much stable, especially over time. So it assumes that if a person is considered friendly overall, that they will be friendly in most circumstances. Now, a friendly person is not going to be friendly every single day and not 100% of the time, because we're human beings and the environment, our mood, how we're feeling that day can influence how we behave. But in general, you would see this person's personality or trait as being something that is stable. So in regards to personality, one of the models that they have is a 5-factor model. And you guys have an assessment that will test you on these as well coming up. That will be what your journal discussion will be on for the week coming. So a 5-factor model is made up of 5 factors, of course. And the first one is neuroticism. So when you think of neuroticism, a lot of people think of someone who's very anxious and like crazy, but it's made up of factors within itself. So neuroticism, they have to deal with anxiety, possibly hostility, self-conscientiousness, depression, impulsiveness, and vulnerability. And vulnerability can be healthy at times, but when it's done to the excessiveness, as meaning that you're heavily reliant on others for your well-being, this can be a negative. So that's why it's listed here under neuroticism. And in aging, research has found that neuroticism decreases over time. So we become less dependent on others, our anxiety decreases, we're less hostile in general. Now, not all people who age decrease in neuroticism, some even increase, but in general, this is what researchers have found. The next factor is extroversion. So this is someone who thinks of someone who's more extroverted. They're probably more outgoing, they're talkative, they're easy to get along with. And they broke extroversion up into 3 traits. And under those 3 traits, there are three things that go along with it. So overall, an extroverted person is interpersonal, they're temperamental, and they're warm. So under interpersonal, they are warm, gregarious, and assertive. Under temperamental, they are very active. They have an excitement-seeking type personality. They have positive emotion as well. And under warm traits, they're friendly, compassionate, and seek intimacy with others. So they want to have that type of companionship and friendship with those around them. And overall, as we age, researchers have found that people become less extroverted. So meaning they pretty much keep to themselves. They're less likely to go out partying and clubbing. And they do have like a group of friends, but it's not like a huge group of friends as someone might have when they're in college or in their early teens. And again, this is a general idea of what the researchers found. There are some people who have also gone older and then become more extroverted. Next on the big 5 is openness. So the 6 factors of openness are their fantasy, which is the idea of how you think how much do you think out of the box? Aesthetics, your desire and appreciation for beauty, the action that you take. Ideas, how open are you to ideas and other people's value, and your mindfulness. So how open-minded are you to opposing views or things that you haven't experienced before. And as we age, researchers found that openness decreases over time. You pretty much become set in your ways as you grow older, or you feel like, there's not much more that I want to experience, so I'm good where I'm at. Fourth is agreeableness. And this is the opposite of antagonism. So someone who is agreeable pretty much doesn't have a problem getting along with other people as someone who is an antagonist would. So there is trust, altruism, kindness, affection, and other pro-social behaviors that bring people together as a community. So overall, someone who's agreeable is cooperative. And research has found that agreeableness increases over time as we age. And last but not least is conscientiousness. And this is someone who's hardworking, ambitious, energetic, and meticulous. Conscientiousness is something that they test for with hiring assessments, because this has been the most important factor, and it's been seen to be most related to high job performance. And research has found that conscientiousness peaks at middle age and then slowly decreases. And I believe this can also be due to just the way our brain ages as well. If you're not if you're not keeping yourself mentally in shape, just your ability to stay focused and be meticulous over the small details just decreases because your brain's ability is not where it was before. Next topic I wanted to go over with you guys is a stability and change in personality traits. So as we said before, that traits should generally remain stable over time, but there is some change that also occurs throughout the aging process. And we're going to review that right now in the upcoming slides. So one of the theories and ideas that support changing in personality is personality adjustment, which involves the developmental changes in terms of their adaptive value and functionality effectively within society and how personality contributes to everyday life running smoothly. So let's say that you generally have a personality that's more introverted, but you're in a job that requires you to speak to people that you don't know and be more outgoing in order to perform well at that job. So you might make a slight personality adjustment in order to effectively maneuver through that job and be successful. Next is personality growth. And I like to also look at this as an idea of maturity. So this is the ideal end state, such as increased self-transcendence, wisdom, and integrity. So one easy way to think of this as we are kids and how easy it was, and it wasn't a big deal to lie to our parents or lie to our teachers or people that were in higher authority as us as children. But as we grow and increase with age, our integrity should increase as well. So we hopefully will lie less. We won't feel a need to lie to our parents or people in authority. And this is something that comes with just going through life and aging as consequences grow bigger, and also as personality growth that you experience as a young child when you would lie or you acted without integrity. You saw those consequences, so you were able to adjust your personality to better serve yourself and also the community that you live in. Next is ego development, and this refers to the fundamental changes in the ways our thoughts, values, morals, and goals are organized. So this transitions from one stage to another, depending on both internal biological changes and external social changes to which the person must adapt. So one way to think of ego development can be the way that we look at our self-esteem. So possibly when you're younger, your ego is based on those things that you value a lot and the goals that you're trying to achieve. So maybe for a teenager, their ego is focused on, let's say, dating, or how popular they are in school, or what type of clothes they wear, or what type of car they drive. But hopefully, as they transition in out of college and they get a career and they really start looking at money and ways that they can better invest their money than in clothes and shopping and fancy cars, then this will change and shape their behavior. But a lot of this has to do with this type of social environment they're in. So if they stay in a social environment that really values aesthetic things like that are not really worth someone's, that don't increase in value over the long term, like buying fancy purses or having the latest sneakers, things like that, then they probably won't change and their ego won't develop in these areas. But if they're in a new environment that shows values in different things, such as kindness or religion or doing philanthropic work, then their ego will develop that way, in the better way as well. But a lot of this, again, has to do with external social circumstances and changes, but also internal biological changes. So in summary of stability and change in personality, things do not normally change, such as our personality traits, unless there are special circumstances and with an environment pushing for it to occur. Personality-related growth and adjustment in adulthood does so in response to ever-changing developmental changes and tasks, such as an established career, marriage, and family. So in Jung's theory, he believes that each aspect of a person's personality must be in balance with all others. So for example, with the personality trait of extroverted versus introverted, both of these exist within one person and they have to balance each out throughout day-to-day life. So for example, you're balancing your inner thoughts and inner feelings with those things that you're getting from the outside world and your connection with other people. And both of them are essential to having a healthy psyche. However, someone who favors extrovertedness over introvertedness would be considered someone who's extroverted, versus someone who favors introvertedness over extrovertedness, they are more introverted. So it's just looking at the aspect of like every type of personality exists within each other, and every type of personality exists within us, but it's on a balancing scale, and whichever side you favor more, that's just the general side that you behave on and act out on a daily basis. With the Erickson theory, he believes that throughout the adult development, as we go from infant to 65 and older, we hit with certain psychological crises or tasks that we must accomplish in order to successfully go into the next stage of development. So when you're infant to 18 months old, you're dealing with the trust versus mistrust. And this will help us determine like hope within our life. So in infants, they have to deal with the conflict of developing trust with the world that they know very, very little about. But with the trust they develop with their parents, their mother or caregiver, there comes a sense of security and comfort, and that's where hope comes in. And then the same goes for the other stages, dealing with the autonomy and shame versus doubt that you develop from 18 months to 3 years old, when you begin to understand that they're in control of their actions, and those actions, there's certain consequences that go with that. And then with each stage, there's something similar that they have to deal with and find the balance between in order to successfully develop into a healthily functioning adult. So looking back at the stages, this chart right here goes into a little bit more detail. So with the infant stage, which is the first stage from infant to 18 months, what happens in this stage is that They decide if needs are dependently met. Infants develop a sense of basic trust. I'm sorry, I think I missaid dependent. So if needs are dependably met, infants develop a sense of basic trust. In stage 2, when we're dealing with autonomy versus shame and doubt, toddlers learn to exercise will and do things for themselves, or they doubt their abilities. Next is preschoolers learn to initiate tasks and carry out plans, or they feel guilty about efforts to be independent because it's unsuccessful or they're punished for them. Fourth stage is children learn the pleasure of applying themselves to tasks, or they feel inferior. Inferiority comes when they apply themselves and nothing changes. The fifth stage is identity versus confusion. Teenagers work at refining a sense of self. So this is where you see a lot of rebellion happening, or teenagers testing rules. This is what they're trying to accomplish at this task. 6 is intimacy versus isolation. Young adults struggle to form close relationships and to gain the capacity for intimate love, or they feel socially isolated. So this has to deal with the comfort in being isolated, but the risk it takes to be intimate with someone. And then the 7th stage is generativity versus stagnation. So the middle-aged discover a sense of contributing to the world, usually through family and work, or they may feel a lack of purpose. This stage is really important too. You can even see people even losing their jobs during the recession that we had about 10, 20 years ago, or also the COVID-19 crisis when a lot of people lost their jobs due to what's going on. And when you lose that, when you lose your career or something that you feel like gave you a way to contribute to the world, you have to dig a little deeper or find another avenue for you to find purpose. And last but not least, which is the final stage, is integrity versus despair. So when reflecting on one's life, the older adult may feel a sense of satisfaction or failure, and this is based on how they lived their life. And oftentimes, the sense of satisfaction doesn't necessarily come by how much money they make or what kind of car they drive. It often comes from the relationships they've had and the contribution that they made to society, or their belief on if they fulfilled their purpose in life or not. So these are the struggles that are resolved through this interactive process, according to Erikson's theory, involving both inner psychological and outer social influences. Next is McAdams' theory of generativity. So this is a tension between creating a product or outcome that outlives oneself and selflessly bestowing one's effort as a gift to the next generation, reflecting on a concern for what's good for the society overall. So this starts with often the cultural demands and inner desire to want to do something that would help the next generation. And then it goes into your beliefs and commitment to that concern, and then the action that takes place that creates meaning for your life. So this is just a way that you can see generativity broken down and how it comes about. Next, we're going to get into the 3 theories of identity, and these are how people's lives' narratives provide insight to their identity and who they are, and even how they can. So the next theory is the Adams life cycle model, which tells us that when you look into someone's life story, that gives you a perspective of their identity. So it says that identity is based on the story of how a person came into being, where the person has been, where he or she is going, and who he or she will become. So the stories that a person tells about them life indicates their values, beliefs, and the ideology that a person uses to set the connection for their actions. So if you listen to someone's overall life story, certain themes will pop out of it that hint towards their values and beliefs. And this is what McAdams did, and this is what he believed in that showed a person's true identity. Next is Whitbourn's identity theory. So this is a theory that says that a person has identity assimilation and identity accommodation based on the experiences they have. So let's say they identify themselves as being a loving, competent, and good person. So they're going to simulate that in their day-to-day life. But let's say they experience something that challenges that identity that they have within themselves. They might make accommodations to best fit themselves from that experience, and there might be some adjustments, and then that goes back into them having a new form of identity. So it's like a cyclical force of someone always testing their identity based on their life experiences and then accommodating or simulating that based on their internal beliefs. So the text says that this theory, Whitburn's theory, believes that the process of adult development is based on the equilibrium between identity and experiences. These are focused on scenarios, which are expectations about the future, that they are often tied to achieve specific outcomes by a certain age. So going back to their identity and experience. So let's say someone had the identity to be a mother by a certain age or get married by a certain age. And let's say maybe that did not immediately happen at that age. They might make life accommodations and create a new identity outside of the focus of being a caregiver and then assimilate that moving forward. So let's say they travel more or focus more on their career. So that's just an example of how someone's scenarios that they set for themselves about the future can be accommodated to better fit their experiences that they're having at the moment. So Whitburn's identity theory findings say that identity, assimilation, and accommodation change with age. The 6 foci model of adult personality. So this integrates both structures of personality and the process of personality within a level of analysis framework. So this theory involves 3 levels with 3 corresponding processes. So the first level is traits, which we went over before, which are dispositional bases of personality. So corresponding process is states, which offers the potential of change, including moods, fatigue, and anxiety. So your trait, so let's go back to the friendly trait of you being generally friendly, can change depending on what mood you're in or how you're feeling that day. So if someone is generally perceived as being friendly, but let's say you catch them on a day where they have only had like 1 or 2 hours of sleep, they're going to be less friendly. So this is how the states can affect the traits. Level 2 is personal action constructs, which is the goals, motivation, and developmental tasks that we set for ourselves. So the corresponding process is that self-regulating. So being self-efficient and the ability to control yourself to achieve your goals and to actually develop at the tasks that you've set for yourself. And the third level is life story, which we touched on just recently, which is scenarios each person creates to provide meaning and purpose to one's life. So the corresponding processes are self-narrative, which reflect the changes one makes in telling one's life depending on the audience. So your life story might vary a little bit depending on who you're talking to and the motivation behind that. So you want to be just cognitive of how it can be shaped by that environment. And next, we're going to get into the self-concept and well-being section. So what is self-concept? Self-concept is the organized, coherent, integrated pattern of self-perception. Self-concepts include the notions of self-esteem and self-images. And you want these to generally be positive of oneself, but also real. And then we also have subjective well-being, which is the evaluation of one's life associated with positive feelings. This is usually associated by measuring one's life satisfaction, happiness, and self-esteem. Subjective well-being is high at young ages, so childhood and teens, hits a low in middle adult life, and then hits its peak though in older ages. And you can see this graph right here that illustrates what I just said. And the reason behind it being very high at a younger age is that your exposure to things is very low. And the level of responsibility isn't that high in a young adult as it is in middle adult life. Versus middle adult life, you might be trying to raise a family, trying to be established in your career. It's more so later in life where you're focused on the meaning of life and the purpose of life and pursuing that versus monetary things. And possible self, this stems from the popular interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or what's your 5-year plan? Or what's your 5-year goal? And when we speculate on things like this, we create a possible self. And possible self represents what we could become, what we would like to become, and even what we're afraid of becoming. So not just looking at things that you hope will happen in 5 years. Subconsciously, when you do that, you're looking at things that you hope that will not happen in 5 years, such as no one ever plans for losing their job, or no one really plans for a sudden death happening. So indirectly, you're also considering those things that you don't want in 5 years when you evaluate your possible self. And now we're going to go back to what we started on, which we started on from chapter 1 in adult development, is a multidimensional lifespan approach to psychopathology. So they're going back to the original lifespan approach, is that we realized that there were 4 forces. First one is a biological force. So when you're looking at the biological forces, physical health and genetic factors are important dimensions to take into account in diagnosing adults and should be among the first avenues explored. Various neurological changes, chronological diseases, functional limitations, and other ailments can change our behavior, which then can also impact our brain health. Moreover, genetic factors often underlie important problems with age. So one example of this would be dementia, having a genetic component to someone's age process in their brain. Next is psychological factors, which is the nature of a person's relationships with other people, especially important in close family members and friends. This is a basic dimension in understanding how psychopathology is manifested in adults of different ages. So looking at different relationships that people have with their family members and friends, this can affect how well they age, or if they will develop psychological disorders as they get older. In the book, Aging Well, one of the key factors in someone having a successful aging process is the positive relationships they had with their friends and families and maintaining those relationships throughout their age. Next is social cultural factors. So social norms and cultural factors play a key role in helping define psychopathology. They influence people's behaviors and affect our interpretation of them. So across different cultures, there are different customs and behaviors that may be normative in one culture, but may be viewed as indicating problems for another. So it's important for us to ask ourselves whether these behaviors are appropriate for this person in a particular setting or not. This is just a factor of force that you want to look into before diagnosing someone, because there's different norms for each culture, and also there's different norms between people. So if someone is naturally an extroverted person and then become very, very increasingly introverted, that might be a sign that something's going on as well. Last is life cycle factors, and how people behave at any point in adulthood is strongly affected by their past experience and the issues that they faced while growing. up into an adult. So the meaning of particular symptoms change with age. So example, problems waking up early in the morning may indicate depression for a young adult, but may also simply be a result of normal aging in an older adult. So again, these are just how differences between people can affect how we see psychopathy issues developing within them, and also if it's something that is a real issue, or just something that's just based on the individual's preferences or culture. And last but not least, we're going to look at the big three mental disorders, which are depression, delirium, and dementia. Depression is a popular mental disorder. A lot of times people use this term lightly, but it's one that is well known. So depression is a mood disorder that causes persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest, and can interfere with your daily functioning. The symptoms of depression or dysphoria, so feeling down or blue on a constant basis, which are accompanied by physical symptoms such as not being able to sleep regularly, changes in appetite, pain, headache, fatigue, and sensory loss. In order for it to be called depression, it's got to last for 2 weeks or longer, and other causes for observed symptoms must be ruled out. So if someone's feeling tired all the time, we have to rule out other things that could be causing that sense of tiredness, such as increased workload or having a new baby, anything that could be not related to depression. And lastly is that it negatively affects your daily life activities. So you're not able to function as a normal adult would because you're experiencing the depression. Second is delirium, which is confused thinking and reduced awareness of one's environment that develop rapidly. So the symptoms include difficulty in paying attention, difficulty in remembering things, orientation, rambling in your speech. Delirium can also affect perception and the sleep cycle, personality, and mood of the individual. Next is dementia. And dementia is not a specific disease, but rather a family of diseases characterized by cognitive and behavioral defects involving some form of permanent damage to the brain. Most popular ones are Alzheimer's disease. This pretty much accounts for 60 to 80% of dementia. Lewy bodies, which are hallucinations, vascular, which is reduction in oxygen to the brain, usually caused by some incident, Parkinson's disease, which is loss of motor functions, and Huntington's dementia, which involves involuntary flicking motions of the arms and legs. All right, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this supports some of you who learn better through audio. And just a reminder that your upcoming assignments are your discussion posts and the response to that as well. So let me know if you have any questions or would like to have a live session of a lecture, or need a one-on-one with me to help clarify some things. Have a great day, class.